And we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Pace and Johnson
with a cinema review.
It is Monday, April 17th, 8 EST, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Cinemaster's Review. Tonight, we have two exciting reviews. First off, we will be reviewing Suzume, the new Makoto Shinkai film. Joining me will be Caleb Boatman, and later tonight, we will be reviewing Renfield, the new Chris McKay, Nicholas Hoult, and Nicolas Cage starring film about the relationship between Renfield and Dracula. But let's just jump right into the first review. Sorry for the bit of a delay, guys. We're just going to jump in right into the meat and potatoes of our show with our first review of the night, Suzume. And joining me, it is the one, the only, the lanky man himself. Some people have called me the hairier version of this man, Caleb Boatman. Caleb, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. I have to ask, is like meat and potatoes a me-specific thing? Like, did you just say that because I'm here?
Honestly, I usually don't say that to start these reviews, but I think I just saw your face in the back, and it just made me think of that, and I'm like, dang it, I'm now stealing bits from the man himself. Boat, how are you?
No, I give you, I did not invent the term meat and potatoes, so I give you full, you have the copyright license, you can put it on your shelf, here you go. But no, I'm doing well. That's what I wanted to be on your show, but I don't typically watch movies before, like on the weekend they come out. I usually am like a week late. I'm a discount Tuesday type of guy. That's just who I am. That's just something I enjoy. But anyway, I'm excited to talk Suzume.
100%. Yeah, I'm someone who's seen 31 movies this year so far, because I have zero standards for what I see in the theaters. But this man, he has standards. But we're both very excited to be talking about Suzume tonight, the new film from Makoto Shinkai. In case anyone doesn't know, he is a pretty, I'd say really building his name as one of the marquee filmmakers in terms of anime right now. This is the guy that did Your Name. He did Weathering with You. He's done 5 centimeters per second, Garden of Worlds. Did a bunch of incredible films and has gained quite the following. And this is his latest movie. It is about a young girl. I think around the age of 17, she discovers some ruins in her town. She realizes that she has the ability to see these spirits when no one else can. In these ruins, she finds a door, and what do you know? She goes to that door, and magical things start happening. Boat, if I could ask you, what is your history with Makoto Shinkai's films, if you've seen any of his previous?
The only one I had seen is the one most people have seen, which is Your Name, which is a movie I love. I adore Your Name. It's on my top 100. I think it's a brilliant movie. I had not seen Weathering with You, but I had heard from some people that it was a little bit of a disappointing follow-up, so that's why I never saw it. But yeah, no, I was very intrigued going into this one, especially because I basically knew nothing going in.
Yeah, 100%. I'm trying to stop saying 100%. I've been told that is something that I need to stop. Just like with we all have certain words, so I'm going to stop doing that tonight. Either that or make it.
That's fair.
Hey, let's go. Yeah, Your Name is. I remember seeing it in theaters back in 2017 and just falling in love with it, and just thinking it was a moment of anime kind of reaching at least the mainstream film watching community, because everyone I know that watches Your Name says that it's one of the best animated films of all time. And honestly, it's top 10, top 15 for me. I think it is such an incredible story about these two people that just find this relationship in this really weird way. Weathering with You I saw, and I was super excited for when it came out, and I also really liked it. I think on a technical level, it is just as good as Your Name with how incredible it looks. I think it falls a little short, especially in terms of the ending. Like, Weathering with You is a movie I would love if it had a stronger ending, but I think it kind of drags it down. So going into Suzume, I was still very, very excited. This is honestly, I don't remember the exact placement, but this is one of my most anticipated movies of the year. And I'll be honest, it paid off. I still don't think this is as good as Your Name. I still think Your Name is his crowning achievement, but I would put it around the same scale, like level of quality as Weathering with You. And I think once again, I think Makoto Shinkai is proving himself to be one of the best like visual filmmakers in terms of an animation style. About just general thoughts on the movie to start off this review.
Yeah, to quickly kind of piggyback off of something you said, though, I think Your Name is kind of lightning in a bottle.
Yes.
It's a little bit of a movie that I don't know if anyone could ever like make like a director could ever follow that. Like that's just it feels like just a perfect storm of greatness. But yeah, general thoughts. Really liked it. This was a movie that took. I think the trailers kept this movie very like secretive, and I like that because I had no idea where this movie was going half the time. Specifically, a turn that happens within like the first 20 minutes that is there for the majority of the movie. There's some really good comedy in this one. Like I find this movie particularly funny. And there's a particularly great comedic action sequence towards the beginning of the film that had me equal parts like laughing, but was also just very thrilling and very fun to watch.
No, yeah, that action sequence. I'm guessing you're talking about the one on the amusement park ride.
No. I was talking about the one. I'm talking about the one pretty early on in the movie. Like it's about like 15, 20 minutes in when the kind of turn happens and it's the first chase between the two characters who would be chasing each other.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of like really cool like chase set pieces in this movie. It gave me vibes of Lupin the Third, and that's always a good thing because that is some of the like most highest kinetic like animation style I can think of. And I just want to say this movie is gorgeous. Like once again, like all of his movies, the colors absolutely pop. Like I think with every Makoto Shinkai movie, the color blue is the color I think of the most, and just how the skies look and how the water looks, I think is incredible. And it always just leaves like a lasting impression on me. And not just how this movie looks. Once again, the music by and I wrote down Radwimps. Yeah, Radwimps is the guy who's composed his last few movies. And once again, I just think he adds so much to the to the feeling and to the vibes of this movie. Like I think Makoto Shinkai knows how to make a really good feeling movie. But what did you think about the animation and of the score in general?
Yeah, I'm Radwimps rule. I love the song. This one didn't have as many like original songs as Your Name did. And I love the original songs for Your Name, but there are, I want to say, 2 actual original songs for this movie, and both are very good. But yeah, the score's great. And yeah, you're right. Shinkai really likes the skies, and he really makes those animated very well. It's a lot of very wide shots, which you don't see a whole lot in these types of movies. And I also think one thing that's interesting is, like, obviously it's animation, so there is no camera, but there are a lot of long takes in this movie. Simulated long takes, but long takes, which is kind of not very common, especially for 2D animation. Like to actually do like a simulated long take where it almost feels like there's a camera like following them. I think that's really interesting and a unique technique animation. So yeah, movie looks gorgeous and it sounds great. I want to quick mention the sound design specifically for one character.
Yes,
it was like it was some of like just the most like funny sound design in a movie. How a certain character is kind of made with sound design.
So with our reviews, I usually try to keep them fairly non-spoiler, and I don't like to reveal things that I feel like have a major depth to the plot. I feel like we can't really discuss the movie without saying what we're talking about. So I say we just talk about this right now. One of the characters of this movie, early on, is transformed into a chair. And let me tell you, most of the comedic effects from this movie happens by the fact that the secondary main character, I believe his name is Sota, that follows Suzume and is essentially Suzume's like guide through this world, is a chair, and it's awesome. I was laughing the entire time.
Not only is he a chair, he's a three-legged chair.
Yes.
And like the way in which he wobbles and maneuvers and walks is so funny. And yes, the opening chair versus cat scene is the one that I was referring to. And that scene is so good. But the way they also make this inanimate object who doesn't like have any real like expressions. Like he doesn't smile, but they are able to communicate so much, not just verbally, but visually, even though he's literally just like a normal chair visually. So the way they're able to communicate so much is very interesting, and I like that a lot.
No, yeah, and you just mentioned, like, one of the first major conflicts in this movie is when Suzume enters this ruins, she finds a door, and when she goes through this door, she quickly closes it, and it seems like everything is normal. But once again, she starts seeing more things that other people can see, and her like companion is turned into a chair. And the main enemy that we meet, his name is Daijin, and it's this creepy looking cat. The second this cat showed up, I was like, that's a scary cat. And I think just the way the movie makes certain things in this movie look, I think it creates like this odd feeling that like you're always intrigued to see what more you're going to experience. But what did you think about the world building of this film?
Yeah, no, the world building is an aspect that was equal parts interesting and intimidating, because it was kind of a lot to wrap my head around at times, but at the same time, I was very intrigued by it. And this is one of those movies that I feel like I'm going to like more on a rewatch, just because there is so much going on. But there is a lot to like. Specifically, I almost wanted a little bit more of the world, though. Like specifically, like how this kind of underground society of the closers is working, and those types of elements, I think, are really fascinating. But I like what we got, and yeah, no, I like. It's kind of an interesting how it's soft fantasy in some ways, where it is 90% in the real world. It's just this one little thing that, oh yes, there's this other world that's trying to populate ours with evil.
No, yeah. Try not to say it. I definitely feel like trying to say 100%. I absolutely feel, as someone who's only seen Makoto Shinkai's last 3 movies, this feels like the biggest one, like in terms of scale and in terms of the ideas that it's trying to tackle. And I really admire the fact that Shinkai is willing to tackle all these big ideas and try to see what he can do in terms of themes. I don't think all of them quite mesh together as perfectly as something like Your Name does, but I think that is because he's trying to tackle so many things, especially with the character of Suzume, with her different familiar relationships, specifically with her aunt and with her mom. I just want to get into some of the story elements. I thought Suzume was a fun main character. Unlike Eric Roberts says, unlike the other movies by Shinkai, Suzume has a closed ending. Yeah, I definitely say that. I can see that. I think Weathering with You definitely has sort of like a, that's how you end it. But yeah, I can kind of see how that goes. But yeah, I think Suzume is a really is a fun main character. I think Sota is easily my favorite character in this movie. Like he starts out as like, I remember when he first shows up, and you think like, okay, this is gonna be sort of like a Howl-esque character from Howl's Moving Castle, of like this like majestic sort of guy, and then he's immediately transformed into this weird guy. It's like, oh, I like you way more. The other side characters are fun, nothing too memorable. But what did you think about the characters of this movie?
Yeah, the one character who you didn't really touch on that for me, is probably the stand of the movie is the cat, Daijin. I think the character, the directions in which this character takes and the motivations are so fascinating and so unique. And I really like this character, especially as the sort of antagonist that this character is and the direction that they take that, I think is so interesting, especially with the way the personality doesn't necessarily match the actions. Because this is essentially what if your antagonist of your film was like more of a Gigi from Kiki's Delivery Service. You know, a character that doesn't necessarily act or speak or have a personality of someone who's kind of doing these nefarious things, but the actions say differently. So I think that's really an interesting dynamic. But I love Soda and the main character. I think the rest of the side characters don't really get a whole lot of focus.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, the movie definitely isn't about them, so I don't hold that as too much of a negative, but it's just one of those things where, like, just certain characters just feel a little bit like blank slates, and a part of me is like, kind of wish they were fleshed out a little, but at the end of the day, this is Suzume's story. This is about her relationship with her mom and her aunt, and I think that really was fascinating. I'm starting to notice, as I was watching this movie, Makoto Shinkai is starting to use a lot of similar bits, like in certain like similar elements from his other movies. Like something I noticed is just like this is now the third movie where the main catalyst, like the main climactic like conflict comes down to a natural disaster is coming. I think about Your Name, it's a meteor. Weathering with You, it's a flood. Suzume, it's now an earthquake. And I'm starting to realize like, these are interesting themes that are beginning to show up in his movies. Did you notice any of that, Bo?
I mean, I haven't seen Weathering with You, so I didn't necessarily make that connection, but I did make a whole lot of like other Your Name connections. Like, this is like, well, it's kind of like what I imagine somebody who like watched like Bottle Rocket and then watched Rushmore. Of like, oh, okay, this is what this guy is about then. Like that's kind of the same feeling of like, oh, okay, this is what he's about.
That is a really, really good example. Of course, many directors use similar themes from different movies, and I think that's just something fun to notice when you watch through their filmography. Something I really like about that this movie does that I've seen him do with his other movies is I just love, and I don't often see that with a lot of anime stuff, but I love just how he uses like modern technology and modern things in Japan. Like I love how like social media is used in this movie, like how Suzume and Sota will be trying to find Daijin, and they'll just see like posts on like this movie's version of Facebook of just people like snapping, like taking pictures of them, and just like the way how characters chat. At one point, you see Suzume's phone, and I just found it a little jarring at first. Like you see the TikTok logo in the corner of one. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Jacob Cameron says, "Hey guys, Suzume was great. We'll see what me and Bo think after this, but we spoiler, we did kind of like it. But yeah, that's just a really fun element I find about especially this movie. What did you think about those elements, Bo?"
That was neat. Kind of similar in Your Name also has those with I think Instagrams in Your Name, or at least not Instagram directly, but an Instagram like app. But the interesting thing to me, and it's something where I did like a double take, and I won't name the specific movie, but there is a reference to a direct verbal reference to another animated movie or another anime movie in this movie, which I don't know if I've ever seen like done before in any animated movie, like not just animated movie. Like I've never seen like a Pixar movie or DreamWorks movie where they just reference Toy Story or Shrek. Like that, I just like did a full on like, okay, like because then it's like, well, if these characters are cartoons, what does that say about the types? Like, are all movies cartoon like animations in that universe, or is there some? Or in this universe, is Whisper of the Heart live action? But that's what they think of like animation as. Like when somebody draws something, it looks like a normal human face because it's a draw. There's so many implications.
It's so funny. So when the reference was made to Whisper, when you see the person make the reference to Whisper in the Heart, I was like, man, that's awesome. I wish more movies would do that. I did not like have this big existential thought process that you do, and I just find that really funny. No, there are two really fun references like that. Like there's that Whisper of the Heart reference, and then there's another moment where the characters are about to go like on a trip in their car, and they're just figuring out like which song to play, and they play a theme from a certain animated film. They don't say which film it is, so it's a little bit more of a subtle reference, but I, as someone that like, yeah, I'll tell you, they play the theme from Kiki's Delivery Service, and that's like my second favorite movie of all time. So the second they did that, my face in the theater was like, and it just made me such like a happy little boy, and I just loved it so much. The one major thing I do want to say, probably my biggest complaint with the movie, and it's unfortunately the same complaint I had with Weathering with You. I wasn't the biggest fan of the ending of this one. I just feel like it's just tonally off from what the movie was setting up. Without spoiling too much, I think they're trying to wrap up a ton of major things that they had set up throughout the movie. And I'll admit, maybe on a second rewatch, I could understand things a little bit more. I was having a little bit tougher of a time keeping track of everything towards the end of the movie. And I also just feel like it just went from like 60 to like 1,000 towards the end in terms of like the scale of the movie and everything that had been set up. But what did you think about the ending?
I agree. Frankly, I'm not going to say what it is, but the resolution of the ending felt kind of unearned and out of nowhere, and it just kind of felt like there's a thing that's like, this can't happen. Well, now it can. Like it kind of felt like there was no real resolution with the actual events. There's some emotional resolution, but the emotional resolution, the actual event resolution are not really connected. So it's kind of a weird thing where you've got two resolutions going on that don't really connect with each other. And the ending felt unearned in a way.
I think unearned is a really, really great way to discuss the ending. Even like the last shot of the movie, it just sort of has like something happens and then credits start rolling. Like it barely even feels like you have time to breathe. And it's so funny because I think the ending to Your Name is perfect. Like I think that movie ends on such an incredible emotional incredible emotional like catalyst, and something like Weathering with You. The issue with the ending of that one isn't that I feel like it's totally different. It's just that it's just a decision a certain character makes, and this one I just feel like you said, just certain things feel unearned with some of the twists. LaFonda Dynamite says, was Suzume a good take on the books? If so, what other anime series would you like to be created? I admittedly have not read the books, but I mean, there are a bunch of mangas that I'm admittedly not like the biggest like manga pre-anime fan, but I'm certain that there are a bunch of other ones that are going to be adapted soon, and I'd be super excited. So thank you, LaFonda. But yeah, I definitely do think the ending was a little bit unearned, and if I'm being honest, that was really my only like major complaints. But before we get into final ratings, is there anything else you want to talk about the movie?
I don't think there's anything else I have to say. I think specifically Soda's the Chair is like going to be like the standout of the movie. I hope they sell that chair. I would buy the Soda chair. I would love that chair.
Yeah, and
I'm not in it obviously, but I would enjoy it.
It's a chair where you have to be very careful about how you sit in it, because you got to like weight yourself towards the front to make sure you don't fall. But yeah, so we are going to be going to ratings tonight. We rate movies on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes. 0 is a horrible experience, a painful experience, one that you won't forget for the longest times for all the wrong reasons. You hope that no one ever makes a single other movie like that. And 10 is a life-changing one. 10 is a masterpiece, and if not that, close to a masterpiece. It's one that is going to stick with you for the longest time. Boatman, on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, what would you give this movie?
See, I gave this movie 4 out of 5, which would be an 8 out of 10. But based on that scale, where 10 is just like that major, I feel like that doesn't quite fit my 5s. So I'm gonna say 7 out of 10 videotapes. Based on that scale, I'm going 7 out of 10 videotapes, because this is a solid movie, is what I would say. Really good, solid time at the movies. I'd recommend it.
7 out of 10. That is definitely a good score. I think I liked it a little bit more than you. I really like the vibes of this movie. I think it's just something I've noticed about Shinkai's movies is I just love the world of it. I'm going to be giving it 8.5 videotapes.
Oh, I didn't realize we could do halves. I would have done 7.5. I'm sorry.
Bo gives it 7.5. I'm so sorry. I should have let it know. But yeah, I will be giving it 8.5 videotapes out of 10. I think this is a great animated film. I think it's just a really fun adventure, and I just love the sort of like really cool like fantasy elements that this one has. I like the fact that Shinkai is getting more ambitious with his movies. I wish he would kind of get back to sticking the landing a little bit more. But overall, I think this is a great, great movie. And if it is your type of movie, if you like going to see animated films in theaters, this is the one to see because it is gorgeous and an incredible like theatrical experience. Well, Boat, before we transition over to our next review, Kaiser Wang says Shinkai and vibes just go hand in hand. Yeah, I completely agree. Like it's one of those things where I can just listening to like the music, it just puts me in the world of those films. But before we move on to our next review, I actually just want to open up questions and comments to the audience. If you want to leave a comment, feel free to. But I'm actually going to ask Boat a comment. I'm not sure if you saw my direct message, but the Cannes Film Festival lineup is coming up, and the Cannes Film Festival is coming up, historic film festival in France, and all the movies have essentially been announced for the festival. But of all the movies that were announced, which is the one you are looking forward to most, if I could ask?
Yeah, I think I have to take the obvious pick, which is Killers of the Flower Moon. There's a few in there, but I think just if the question is looking forward to the most, Killers of the Flower Moon is just looks like such a magnificent movie. Like, I am so excited for it. Like, Scorsese working with DiCaprio and De Niro. Like, his two guys both together just seems like such a good time. This is a movie I've been waiting for since we thought we were going to get it last year. So, yeah, no, very, very pumped for this. Yeah.
Killers of the Flower Moon is my second most anticipated movie of the year, and it probably would have been my choice. I decided when I decided to send you and Jake this question that I was not going to be taking that movie because I wanted one of you guys to pick it. The one that I'm really, really excited for, not just from the director, but also from just the concept of the movie, is Todd Haynes' May December. Do you know what this movie is about?
I actually know nothing about this.
Okay, so it's about Natalie Portman is playing an aspiring actress. She's playing an actress, and she is going to essentially live with Julianne Moore and Charles Melton's character to essentially get essentially to research stuff for this role. And it's essentially her witnessing like sort of the issues with their relationship. Todd Haynes is a director I really, really like. I really like that cast. And that just sounds like an incredibly interesting premise. And I'm very excited to see the word of mouth when that does premiere at Cannes.
Yeah, no, that sounds interesting. I'm excited. That sounds cool. I like that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining tonight, Bowman. I know you always say you don't often rush out to see new releases as often as I do, but whenever you do, please come on, because I think this was a great conversation we had tonight.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Have a great night. Thank you again, Boatman, for coming on the show. Caleb, I'm sorry. We always call him Boatman. There are two Calebs in this community. He gets what I mean. But we're going to be jumping into the second review for tonight. Dream casting. We've always wanted to see it. Nicolas Cage as the man himself, Dracula. We're talking Renfield, and joining me, the first guest I ever had on this show. He's coming back. It's the one and only Jake Meltzer. Jake, how are you doing tonight?
Doing good. I unfortunately couldn't be here when I was initially supposed to be here for John Wick Chapter 4. I was really bummed I couldn't make that, especially because this movie, spoiler, is not as good. But I'm still excited to be here. I always love talking movies with you, and I'm interested to talk about this one in particular because there are a couple things that I think are very interesting about it.
Absolutely. Jake, you are one of my favorite people to talk about movies with, so the feeling is definitely shared. And yeah, spoiler alert, this movie is not as good as John Wick Chapter 4, but I would also say John Wick Chapter 4 is my favorite movie of the year, so it's a little bit of a tough mountain to climb right now. But I just say we get into the plot synopsis of this movie. This movie is about the assistant of Count Dracula, R.M. Renfield, who has been assisting Dracula since, as this movie lets us know, since the Great War. And it is about essentially him. Dracula is sort of regress into a sort of bit more vegetative state. He's not quite as strong as he once was. And he needs Renfield to go around New Orleans finding people. And Renfield is starting to realize, maybe I don't want to do that. And you slowly start to realize the issues with their relationship. When the movie is about that, I'm really enjoying it. We'll get to other things in this movie, but Jake, what did you think? Just short, quick thoughts about the movie. What were your initial thoughts?
Well, initially, like going into it or coming out of it?
Okay. I'll say going into the movie.
Okay, so going into it, obviously the big draw for me was Nicolas Cage's Dracula.
Yes.
I mean, he's been very open about there are 3 roles that he has wanted to play in his life: Superman, Captain Nemo from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and Dracula. He was going to play Superman. We all know how that turned out. There's a whole giant story about it. If you want to know more about it, listen to Kevin Smith talk about it, or watch the documentary by John Schnepp. But he gets his shot at Dracula, and it is everything I could have wanted it to be and more. Like, yes. That is, whatever you feel about the rest of the movie, it is hard to deny how magnetic and entertaining and hilarious Nick Cage is as Dracula. And unfortunately, the movie is not called Dracula. It is called Renfield. That is not to say that Nicholas Hoult is bad. I generally like him in other roles, and I like him here too. And like you said, when it focuses on his and Dracula's relationship is when I agree that is when the movie is strongest. But it also felt like, and this is me going into more of how I feel about the movie in general, it felt to me like this would have been, that idea would have made for an amazing SNL sketch. But then they added on the extra stuff with the police corruption and everything involving Awkwafina's character and all the gang stuff to pad it out to even 93 minutes, which isn't a very long runtime. But that just felt like padding, and it felt like they didn't have enough to add on to this central story about this toxic relationship between Renfield and Dracula, and the idea of him going to therapy, having the dual purpose of both going to therapy to sort of work this stuff out, but also to sort of do his job for Dracula. It's like, that's an interesting idea, but I think I just think this movie doesn't quite hum when Cage is not on screen.
That is completely fair, and I think I share most of your thoughts. I want to get into a lot of what you said, but the first thing I really want to get into is when I think this movie is at its best, it's not just okay. I'll just say I'm with you. When this movie is at its best, it's because of Nicolas Cage as Dracula. He is having so much fun in this role, not just when he is like this bloodthirsty creature, but like when he's just this like when he's like this sniveling villain that's like giving Renfield all this crap. It is the funniest thing in the world. Like I don't know why this is the first thing that came to my mind, but I weirdly was thinking of like There Will Be Blood when Daniel Plainview was just slapping Eli Sunday. It just gave me those vibes of like, why am I laughing? But this movie's obviously has a much more comedic tone than that one. But yeah, I think Nicolas Cage is incredible as Dracula. I think the makeup effects that they have him do are great. And like you said, I love how this really shows like this how when this movie is using the relationship between Renfield and Dracula to display a toxic relationship. I think it is really funny. There's maybe the hardest I think I laughed in the movie is it's very early on where we're seeing an instance when it seemed like these priests almost had Dracula. They had him in this ring of fire and it looks like they were about to burn him, and Dracula said, Renfield, I know we've had some issues, but I promise you, if you save me, it's going to be you and me. I'll be there forever. And you just hear this narration of Renfield's mind where he said, and in that moment, I really thought he means it this time. And then he saves it. And I'm like, when you have jokes like that, that is when I was laughing the most. And like you said, the therapy scenes when you see Renfield like going to therapy and try to get his life around, that's when I was laughing the most. Jake, what do you think of like? Would you be willing to go into like further detail on those scenes?
Yeah, I really liked that. I like that they give some more. I like that it's not just Renfield, that they are giving some of the supporting characters like a little bit more in there to make it feel like a real group. I liked the texture of the space. I liked the space. I liked. I forget the guy who plays the group leader. I think is really good. And I liked that sort of how Renfield kind of the explanation for like why Renfield is there beyond just him going to sort of sort out his own demons, so to speak, his own issues with Dracula. And like that, I think like a lot of that, and particularly, and then the scene is kind of teased in the trailer when Dracula comes to the therapy group is really great.
Oh yeah.
And, it just Cage throwing 102, and you get the reactions. It's like, oh crap, like we're dealing with a little more than just a bad boss here. The realizations that everybody have, and just on a I wouldn't say on a personal level, but I got like a huge kick out of there's the one person who is in the group who keeps getting interrupted by Renfield. That was a good recurring bit. And I also liked that, as somebody who relatively recently watched the Terrifier movies, that actress is the main girl from one of the main girls from the first Terrifier film. So I was like, oh, cool. She's moving up in the world. But that was a good running gag, as well as I couldn't help but think of. There's this sort of a running gag about ska music, and I couldn't help but think about our dear friend Bill Cariola.
Yeah.
During that part, like, there's like moments like that. I think that it's like it's like shows that there was a better movie in here.
Almost there, yeah.
Yeah, it like just doesn't quite get there because of some of the other stuff I imagine we're about to talk about.
Yeah, I am right there with you, where I absolutely think my favorite like part of like the supporting characters in this movie, if we're not viewing Dracula as a supporting character, which I guess he kind of is, but like those therapy scenes were definitely my favorite. This movie has a really funny like bit that like it's not explicitly said, but one of like to me the weirdest bits of Dracula's lore is that he cannot enter someone's house unless he's invited into it. And I think this movie does a really good job at never like explaining that, but also getting around that rule in a few clever ways.
There's one scene in particular where I thought it was really clever. I think for that I think the one thing I will give the movie credit for is that I think the movie understands that the people watching it know the Dracula lore pretty well, so they don't really need to explain a lot of it. It's just like, he doesn't like sunlight. That he has to be invited in. That it's like wooden stakes are a weapon you get to the heart. It's like you the audience already know this, so we don't need to hold your hand through it. And I think that's another thing that I think works in this movie's favor and is used for humor in an effective way.
Definitely, yeah. The character Dracula has been around for hundreds of years. I think most people know, and I don't think people like need their hand held with it. I think this movie wisely says that. Eric Roberts asks, why doesn't Dracula bite Renfield's neck and drink his blood? Funny story, he has, and that's how Renfield sort of has his superhuman powers. But the reason why he doesn't completely kill him is because if he does that, then Dracula has no one to go out into the sunlight to find people for Dracula to kill. That is the entire reason, essentially, for why Renfield and Dracula have this partnership, is because Dracula knows if he doesn't have someone to do this, he cannot go out into the sunlight. Just want to explain that, but
I think that's just a general, like, they touch on the concept of the familiar, which is something that, like, if you've seen Blade, if you've seen even like What We Do in the Shadows, specifically the TV show, it's an idea that in vampire lore that is pretty common. So it's like that's sort of inherent to the power dynamic where like he uses Renfield for his own gain and that he can just sort of control him and give him this power to keep him close, because it's like, oh, I have this power and I will lose this power without him. So I think that's sort of inherent to the toxic relationship, why he doesn't bite Renfield's neck. It's like, I think there's just there's some of the subtext there that
definitely, yeah, and the movie definitely does a good job at showing you why it does that, why they do that. Let's essentially just get into some of the negatives, because I think you and me are kind of on the same page here. When Renfield arrives in New Orleans, there's one night where he's at a restaurant and he's trying to find people that he thinks would be a good suit for Dracula. Renfield sort of has this moral code where he doesn't want to go after innocent people. He tries to find like essentially seedy people to go after, and eventually an action scene breaks out, and we learn that there's this big criminal underground that is hiding out in New Orleans, and Awkwafina's character Rebecca, played by Awkwafina, she plays a cop. She's essentially trying to find out who these criminals are, and there's essentially a crime syndicate run by Teddy Lobo, who is played by Ben Schwartz. And I'll be honest, Jake, I think Awkwafina does a decent job here, but every time they cut back to the story, I couldn't care less, and I was a little checked out. Not checked out in a way where I wasn't paying attention, but just sort of rolling my eyes like, can we please get on from this? I want to go back to Renfield and Dracula. Jake, what did you think about this storyline?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think what I will give I give movies credit when they cast actors against type, and particularly comedic actors who are so in this. And I think sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I think it's not that I don't like Awkwafina. There have been times where I really liked her as a performer, even in like more serious stuff. Like I think The Farewell is a phenomenal movie.
Yeah.
She's fantastic in it. But I just think that I think she's a little bit miscast here as like an action heroine, essentially. And she's like and I sort of touched on this earlier, there's sort of a police corruption subplot going on, and she's like the honest cop in this sea of corruption. And I think that it does feel tacked on, and it definitely am like, can we just please? I'm with you in like the feeling. Can we please get back to Dracula? What I will say though, she feels a little more miscast than Ben Schwartz does, which is a similar thing where Ben Schwartz, known for his comedy, obviously the legend John-Ralphio Saperstein from Parks and Recreation, true icon. But I actually kind of liked him as the like he's somebody who's like puffing up his chest to like he's like, oh yeah, I'm a gangster, I'm hot shit, and then but he really is just kind of a whiny mama's boy at the end of it. I liked that idea, and I kind of wish that if you are going to have sort of some of these parallel storylines that where it's like Renfield has this toxic relationship with Dracula, Teddy kind of has this toxic relationship with his mother, and using those as parallel storylines, I think that could have worked if they were at all interested in exploring that, but they don't really. The mom is not the mother who's sort of the real brains behind the operation. She's not really a fleshed out character. She's just kind of a standard, like just standard baddie. And I think that I wish that had been fleshed out more, but I just wish the Awkwafina character was a little bit more interesting, other than Awkwafina just sort of firing off quips like she does, and I think she's funny, and she has some good lines in this movie, and I think just in general she's a engaging and funny performer, but I just don't think that this was really the role for her. And I didn't really buy her and Nicholas Hoult having feelings for each other either. And like, I think the movie was a little bit confused on whether they were became romantically interested in each other or not. I feel like if they had committed one way or another, whether they are interested in each other romantically or they're just platonic and they're friends, there was a little more clarity there. I think it would have worked a little better, but I ultimately think she's unfortunately miscast, and I think it does kind of grind the movie to a halt whenever the focus shifts to her character instead of Renfield or Dracula.
It's so funny. It's so funny. It's interesting. I actually kind of think the opposite about Awkwafina and Ben Schwartz than you do. I didn't hate Awkwafina in this movie. I honestly kind of like that she was a little bit more understated. Like, she's still definitely playing the comedic role, but like, she's not as like quippy. Like, I didn't find her as quippy as like some other movies that you would see her in. I feel like she's a little toned down. Ben Schwartz, I appreciate what he was trying to do, but he was just starting to get on my nerves at some point in this movie. Honestly, it kind of reminded me of Taika Waititi in Free Guy. I'm not sure if you saw Free Guy, but it never got to that level for me. But at one point, I was just like, okay, I get the whole joke about this character. I felt like it had one joke, and it didn't really go past that. And like you said, if the movie would have tackled his relationship with his mom and showed it as a parallel to Renfield and Dracula, I think that would have been really great. But I think the issue is the movie just doesn't do anything with it. And every time those characters shows up, who are essentially the villains of this movie, minus Dracula, you're just like, can we please just get back to Dracula, please? Like you, I didn't buy Renfield or Rebecca as a relationship for a second. I think the movie, I think by the end it wanted you to think they were just friends, but at the same time, Renfield definitely liked Rebecca, or at least thought he did. And yeah, I kind of just wish the movie did make a choice as well. The last major element I want to get into with this movie, and I think the thing that does kind of make me have a little bit more of a positive outlook on it overall, is I think the action was honestly really good and really comedic. Like, and I was not expecting it to get this gory, but I think the blood, specifically, there's one really, really great action scene in like a motel complex that I think was really, really fun to watch, and that was the one that probably had me laughing the hardest, as opposed to the final one, which I think is okay, but I don't think reaches the height of like the second major one. What did you think about the action in this movie?
Yeah, it's interesting we had sort of brought up John Wick Chapter 4 earlier, where it's like, watching action movies after John Wick Chapter 4 is tough because you're so spoiled by how incredible that action is. But I did enjoy the action. I enjoyed the over-the-top gore. I think some of the gore effects were really fun and really good. My favorite action scene is kind of was actually sort of the first major one.
That one is great.
Where there's a seemingly very formidable henchman introduced, a scary, formidable henchman introduced, and the fight between him and Renfield, I think, was really good and sort of gave us a good introduction to what to expect from the action. And then I think every action set piece that followed, like, I enjoyed parts of it. I think there were times where I feel like the movie fell into the quick cuts trap, in terms of the editing of the action sequences, but overall I did enjoy them. I did, with the exception of, I think you sort of said the final fight feels a little bit underwhelming.
Yeah.
But the first fight in the garage or whatever, and then the fight in the restaurant, I think each subsequent fight scene was, while I still liked the motel scene, I think was each subsequent action scene, big action set piece, was a little bit of diminishing returns for me. Just because I think some of the various gags with the gore and the blood, I think, were really effective. Though there was one in the motel action sequence involving a severed arm that was tremendous.
That was easily my favorite, like, blood gag in this movie.
That was pretty great. I will give it up for that. But I always sort of rub up against CGI and wire work, unless it's built in from the beginning, like something like I like a wuxia type of thing. Like, I just watched a movie very recently called The Heroic Trio, where it's like an early 90s Hong Kong action movie, with Michelle Yeoh and Maggie Cheung. And that is built into it, and you're sort of realizing it's a fantasy world and it's fine. It's like, but this sort of it's not like this is grounded action. Obviously, there's an over-the-top element to it, and like the idea of Renfield having powers. But I don't know. I just, like, when it comes to CG, like, there's like CG stuff in there, and I always sort of brush up against that a little bit, especially in the wake of something like John Wick, where the CG is supplementary as opposed to central.
Yeah, CG blood always bothers me a little. Like, with what Garth said, I think the issue is that, like, with it being digital, they never remember that, like, oh, blood just doesn't just disappear after something. Yeah. Like, it should be all over. So yeah, that did bother me a little, but I think it's handled fairly well. And I think I was just when the action is good, I do think it is really good. Garth also asked another question. I have not seen this other movie, but so which is the better Nick Cage as a vampire movie, Renfield or Vampire's Kiss?
Oh, easily Vampire's Kiss, easily, just for the camp factor alone. Like, it's just, Payson, treat yourself at some point very soon and watch Vampire's Kiss, and get in the hive, because that movie is a delight. If only, like, to just hear him scream the alphabet.
So Cody recently watched it, and he told me he hated it, and that only made me want to watch it more, because I know that it's maybe like the least Cody movie of all time.
Yeah, I imagine Kirk probably hates it too. Speaking of the other noted grump in this community, I didn't come in here with an agenda, meaning
you're fine.
Body Kirk if he ever watches this, but just like, it's very much like, it's very silly. It's very campy, but Vampire's Kiss is just an absolute blast, and that is peak Cage, I think, for peak crazy Cage. It's like, it's not my favorite Nicolas Cage movie by any stretch of the imagination, but if you want like the best unhinged Cage, I haven't seen Valley Girl, so I can't really comment on that. But like, if you want peak unhinged Cage, Vampire's Kiss is the way to go. This is fun, and I think it's certainly in terms of his more recent output, like when he taking away movies where he's playing himself. Because I did really enjoy The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. But taking away movies where he plays himself, this is some of my favorite Nick Cage work of the last 10, 15 years, I would say, like in terms of how much I enjoyed his work here. But yeah, Vampire's Kiss would be an interesting double feature with this.
Yeah, I've been wanting to watch Vampire's Kiss. I've seen the one major scene of him doing the alphabet, and it seems like a very, very fun movie. Kirk, one of our favorite guests here. Kirk, we love you. Just, you can be a little grumpy sometimes, but
yeah,
you're a great guy. We're going to get on to final ratings tonight. You already heard my rating spiel when we were talking about Suzume. But Jake, on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, what would you give this movie out of 10?
I want to give it a different rating than I gave Magic Mike's Last Dance, which was 6 out of 10 videotapes. But yeah, I can't go higher than that. Like, part of me wanted to go 6.5. I just, everything outside of the Renfield Dracula therapy stuff was just at so much of a lower level than that stuff that it really dragged a movie that should be very briskly paced at 93 minutes, but did feel padded out nonetheless. But come for Cage's Dracula, he is probably worth at least 4 videotapes by himself, maybe even 5, because he's really fantastic in the unfortunately limited screen time that he has. And then, like we said, there's some fun action as well. But yeah, I was a little bit disappointed based on some of my expectations that I had.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go a little higher than you. I'm actually going to give it 7 out of 10 videotapes. I think there are definitely a lot of things that I think hold this movie down, mainly the whole police corruption subplot. But I think when this movie is good, specifically with Nicolas Cage and Nicholas Hoult, I didn't really talk about it. I think Nicholas Hoult does a really good job as the title character, Renfield. He's just like, I think he has like, I think he's really good at picking roles, like specifically just picking like fun movies. Like, I just think he's really good at like playing not only like, I think he's really great at playing weirdos. Like, if any, like, have you seen The Menu?
I have, yes.
Like, perfect guy at just playing like the weirdest guy in the world, whether you like him or hate him. Just great at playing weirdos, and I think he's really good here. I wish I could go higher on this movie, but 7 out of 10. I think overall it is a good movie. Yeah, like Melissa said, Nick Cage is innocent. He is great in this. No one would ever say that Nick Cage is bad in this movie. I think I would have to think to say, like, is there a movie I don't like Nick Cage in? Like, whether I think about the movie, like, he's just one of the most like likable actors, like in my opinion.
Yeah, I've always been a big Cage fan. I think the people who sort of write him off as a ham or somebody who is too over the top, I've always saw the method in his madness, and he actually, when he has the right material, he can author like a genuinely great performance, like something like a Pig, for example, or obviously your beloved Adaptation.
I love Adaptation, yeah.
So I think that actually works in his favor, that he can do stuff like that and then also just go completely off the reservation, like he does in A Vampire's Kiss, or at least the first like half an hour of Face Off. So Yeah, I've always appreciated Cage, and I really do hope he continues to go back to doing more mainstream stuff instead of doing just a lot of these sort of direct to video stuff, whether it's indies in the vein of Pig, key supporting parts in something like this. Like, I really hope that he continues to work his way back into the mainstream and get out of that direct to video hell that he was in.
Thankfully, the man is no longer bankrupt, so like he doesn't have to do that stuff anymore. So really enjoy that. But yeah, we're gonna get into questions and comments. I'm gonna ask you the big question I asked, but I did see a few comments from the people watching. Thank you all so much. Garth says Nicholas Hoult has played a somewhat werewolf as Beast, a zombie, and now a vampire's familiar. What monster would you like to see him play next? That is a really good question.
That is a really good question. I guess no, you can't really do that. Wow, that was a really good question. I wouldn't mind him seeing I wouldn't mind seeing him play an actual vampire, instead of just as a familiar. He has the pallid skin complexion already, so if he played like an actual vampire, he could do that really well, whether it's like a more refined vampire or like a really weird vampire. I think he's just a really versatile actor, as you see with some of the variety of quote-unquote creatures that he's played. So yeah, make him an actual vampire. Give him the glow up.
No, absolutely. The one I was thinking, sort of going off, just thinking about his build, I couldn't really see him as Frankenstein's monster, like something that's bigger, but think of him as the creature from the Black Lagoon.
That was my first thought, but then it's it's not really him though.
Fair. Yeah, okay, yeah. That is a good point. I'm still gonna take that. I know it's a little cheating, but I think that would be the one I am gonna pick. I also another one from LaFonda Dynamite. Does Aquafina lay any smooth raps out? Someone told me she's one of their fave rappers. I don't know who told you they were one of their fave rappers, but she does not rap in this movie. So
she does not. No. It might have been better if she did. I don't know.
Fair. Thank you.
That might have been a bridge too far, but no, she does not rap in this movie.
All right. Well, Jake, like I said, Cannes is coming up. The lineup has been announced. What is your personal most anticipated movie of the festival, or just one you want to talk about?
Yeah. So I purposefully was going to avoid Killers of the Flower Moon because that was too obvious. I decided to challenge myself a little bit. I looked at the in competition. There were a couple of things. There was one in competition and one out of competition that caught my eye. The out of competition one is not the one you're thinking. That isn't Killers of the Flower Moon. It's the newest movie from a director I actually have really is the Kim Ji-woon. Has directed movies like Tale of Two Sisters, The Good, the Bad, and the Weird, I Saw the Devil.
Okay. Yep.
He has a new movie out called Cobweb. It's called Cobweb. I forget what the premise was off the top of my head, but that's interesting. But the real one I wanted to talk about is in competition. The movie is called The Zone of Interest. And it's directed by Jonathan Glazer, and whose last movie was 10 years ago.
Oh my God!
Under the Skin,
so good,
is a fantastic movie. Not for most mainstream people, but weirdos like us.
Yes,
24 people. It is an A24 movie. That one, great. This, I don't know if it's A24 off the top of my head. I don't believe so. But The Zone of Interest, it's his first movie in 10 years. I believe it's about a Nazi officer who is working at a concentration camp and falls for the commandant's wife. Understatement. Yeah, and just that premise alone is very provocative, certainly, and particularly someone of my persuasion, it's very provocative. But just interesting to see Jonathan Glazer back after making such an impression with that. He also did Sexy Beast was his first movie, which is another really movie.
Yeah.
Couldn't be more different than Under the Skin, but just as compelling. And I just really am interested in seeing where he goes next with this, because just the premise is interesting. He's just so interesting as a visual artist, that of the competition offerings, that is the one that really stood out to me.
Yeah, I completely forgot there was a new Jonathan Glazer movie coming out, and now that you reminded me, that one's like at the top of my list. Yeah, like you, I love Under the Skin. It's like weirdly like a really good, like, I view it as like a serial killer movie of just this woman from like another planet just hunting people down, and just where it goes from there I think is incredible. He made a super underrated movie in 2004 called Birth, with Nicole Kidman. I'd recommend anyone check that out. It's super weird.
I haven't seen it. I've heard very good things though.
Yeah, it's essentially Nicole Kidman's character's her husband dies, and then a kid shows up who claims to be the reincarnated version of her husband, and things just get weird from there. Jonathan Glazer, incredible filmmaker. Thank you for mentioning him. Thank you for coming on tonight, Jake. It's always a blast to talk movies with you.
Obviously, like a huge fan. I'm glad I could finally make it here. I'm just gonna post up now and reserve Dune Part 2 later this year.
Fair.
You're the biggest Dune heads around.
Yeah.
You know? Give me that spice. I'm gonna plant my flag now.
Yeah, there are a few reviews where like even months down the line I'm like, I want that person to get on. I have not thought about Dune Part 2, but I'm totally having you on for Dune Part 2 to talk about that, because that is like, that's a top 5 most anticipated movie of the year for me.
Really hope my work schedule works out that I can talk about that one for sure.
Thank you all for watching tonight. Remember to like the video, to like this video and subscribe to the video store. We have incredible shows every day coming out, and it's all just talking about our love of movies, our love of music with the set list. Jake, before you leave, would you like to plug like your Letterboxd or anything?
If you wanna, you can. It's my name. So if you want to give me a follow, sure. I don't care though. I just like logging stuff.
Absolutely. Follow me at the _ Cinemaster, Cinemaster. Joining next week, maybe one of my most anticipated reviews I think we've done thus far. We have Evil Dead Rise, the newest entry in the Evil Dead film, in the Evil Dead franchise. And joining me will be one of the founders of the video store, Mike Hanley. I don't know anyone that loves that franchise as much as he does, and I am so excited to talk about that movie with him. Warning for everyone, that episode's probably going to be very, very explicit on language, so just giving everyone a forewarning. Evil Dead Rise, not a movie for kids.
Not even just with Mike Hanley on the show.
Very, very good point, because joining after that, we have the new Ari Aster film, Beau is Afraid. One of the weirdest looking movies I think I've seen in terms of trailers this year, and I am so excited. And joining me, I couldn't find anyone better. The only man I know that loves A24 more than me, Aaron J. I'm so excited to be talking about that movie with him. I think it's probably going to be one of our most like in-depth discussions on like what the movie means. That movie does not look like it's going to be accessible at all. So
for a movie that Ari Aster himself refers to as Jewish Lord of the Rings, I could think of no one better about this movie than my fellow Jew, Aaron J.
Absolutely. And even stuff, man, like looking at next week, that it's one of the unfortunate reasons why like I'm sad that I can only review 2 movies right now, because like next week we also have How to Blow Up a Pipeline, which looks really good. We have Kelly Reichardt Showing Up, which I'm starting to become a really big like Kelly Reichardt fan. And then we have Guy Ritchie's The Covenant, which I'm not sure how good it's going to be, but Guy Ritchie always kind of interests me. But yeah, Evil Dead Rise with Mike Hanley, Beau is Afraid with Aaron J. Thank you all for showing up tonight. It's been a blast. Have a great night, everyone. Oh, I did not. There we go.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited. This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.